Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to Couch Conversations with the Doctors, where health is wealth. Our conversation, of course, is for informational purposes only, but we are giving out great information to help you move forward in life and be more healthy. As we always do, we're going to go around the board really quickly and introduce our panel, everyone that's here on this evening. So, first, we're going to start with Dr. Pete Thomas. Dr. Pete, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Dr. Pete Thomas. I am eager to answer any questions you guys have, and I'm excited about that.
Simply fantastic to my coworker, Dr. Douglas Graham, who is here with us on today. Dr. Graham.
Hey, thanks, Nikki. I'm a retired physician. I'm working in Representative Davis' office, and it's a real honor to be here. I'm going to try and answer your questions if I can.
Simply fantastic to Dr. Tony Hanson, that weight loss guru. Go right ahead, Dr. Hanson.
All right, I'm a family doctor on the
Who I
south side of
think
Chicago.
maybe just about this much
And
frozen.
Am I
I think
frozen?
everybody may be frozen.
Oh, that's weird.
Tony, I can hear
Dr.
you.
Hanson, are you
You hear me
frozen?
okay? Maybe it's on Nikki's end. Okay, so family
Yeah.
doctor, obesity doctor, south side of Chicago. Love helping people. Happy to be back in Chicago. I had a chance to go to San Diego to talk about nutrition there, and it was a lot of fun. The weather is nice in San Diego, so but I'm trying to adapt to being in this humid, warm weather that we have here. So, but happy to be here. Hope we can answer some questions tonight.
Fantastic. And I see we have Dr. Terry Mason, who appears as if he is sitting in a lovely library.
Thank you, Nikki. And again, my name is Dr. Terry Mason, and I'm a retired urologist and retired administrator and just tired sometimes. But I'm grateful to be here, and I thank the congressman for allowing us to have this forum. And I, like my colleagues, are here to try and answer your questions.
Simply fantastic. Thank you so much. The congressman might be coming in very late on this evening. He's in a congressional roundtable. So that's the reason why you don't see him right now. That's where he is. Actually, it's going to be a part of it will be on the news this evening at 10 p.m. because there was a press conference with it just as well. So look around for that information, and hopefully he'll get done in enough time where he can join us. I want to say hey to Linda Johnson, who is here. She says good evening to everyone. To Nellie Purnell, who is here, who says good evening, everyone. Linda Johnson is here, and she's laughing out loud. Audrey J. Cox is here just as well. And so is President Steele from the Water Reclamation. And we have Jackie Robertson Ivy that is here just as well with us. So we just want to say thank you to everyone who's here. And I guess we can get started on some of our questions that we have. I think that's the structure we'll take. We'll go right to some of our questions. Our first question is from last week. And Mr. Cook made sure that he resent it so we can ask his question. Wilbur Cook said, in a busy schedule, how can I find ways to exercise in a short time frame with optimal results? Oh, I know Dr. Terry Mason is going to love this question.
Well, I think that time is not found, it's made. So you have to decide if this is a priority for you, you don't need all day. You just need a small amount of time with effective exercises. You can do a lot. So I would suggest that if it's important to you, that you carve out the time, you make it a priority to do it. And I would say you only need to carve out probably 15 minutes to an hour, depending on your age and depending on how much or what type of exercise you're going to do. I'll also ask my colleague, Dr. Thomas, to comment on that one.
Yeah, and like Dr. Mason said, it's all on you, and you making it a priority for you. I know as men get older, our testosterone levels tends to decline. And so it's important that exercise becomes a regular part of your day to maintain adequate testosterone levels. That sort of makes us feel confident and productive and strong. And so the testosterone hormone also helps us to burn fat and keep our waistline down and keep our shoulders strong. And so exercise is important. You should make it a priority. There is something called NEAT, is NEAT, is non-exercise activity training. And what that is you build NEAT, and that's the non-exercise activity training within your day. So that means if you have to take something to the copier, instead of taking the elevator to do it, you take the stairs. If I normally have my nurse to put my patients in the room, but I'll actually go to the waiting room to get my patients. And if you do that over time, how much calories you're burning, how many, the amount of leg muscles that you're using, that need is important. So you can do things like that to help.
I think this question was timely because I just came back from San Diego, and one of the people who I had talked to previously was Dr. Ben Bokikio. And Dr. Ben Bokikio, who's also a California native, in the 70s did research on, he did his PhD in exercise-related sciences. And so he said he doesn't like to be inefficient. So his research was really to see what's the most efficient way to exercise. And since learning about his procedure and also learning that a lot of the people I respect also do it, I said, let me give it a shot. So what he does is it's almost like high intensity. When we think about high intensity exercise, we think about interval training where you go really fast and then you slow down, you go, and that's really that's a lot of bang for your buck as well. But what he found is that a bigger bang for your buck is to do high intensity exercise without the interval part. In a way, it's interval. And it's almost like anybody watching this knows that if you do a push up and you do it slow, it's harder, right? So you almost get more out of doing 5 slow push-ups than you get out of doing 30. So I'll send a link to that interview I did, but when you get to the link, the video is just an interview. You go to the show notes, and he has this exercise pattern with bands, which only cost you about $25 on Amazon or Walmart, with a total gym, which would be an investment, and going to the actual gym. But the key is that you do everything slow. This is the beautiful part you won't believe. Because he said, getting to the exercise is a struggle. It's 15 minutes twice a week. So the key is when you take that muscle and you get it to that point where it's like, okay, I can't do it anymore. That means that you can't, at that point, then you need like 2 days to recover. So today is Monday, you do it today. Actually, this is the day when I have to do that exercise. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, no exercise. Thursday, you exercise. Friday, Saturday, no. And it's mind-blowing how effective it is. And the host of Low Carb USA, who was the sponsor of this conference, he was a frail guy about a year ago. And if you look at him now, in fact, the guy in the video that you'll see with the bands is him. And it's just amazing to see what's happened. So anyway, I'll send a link to that podcast. But again, it's not the podcast, it's the show notes that show you how to do. And all you got to do is make an investment of $25. And I can't think of anybody watching who can't find 15 minutes to suffer for 15 minutes and then you're done. So I've been encouraging a lot of my patients to do it. And if you think about the people on the panel, whether they're retired or not, like Dr. Mason is retired, but he's still busy, I'm sure, right? So we don't have a lot of time to do anything. So if we can take that time and fine tune it, I think it'll be a great value.
I'd add one other thing to that, Tony, is that what I found that myself, in fact, I did it today just before doing this, is getting out and walking. It doesn't take any instruction. You don't need any trainer. You don't need, all you got to do is just go outside, especially as nice as it was today. And what I've been doing is, and over the 6-month period between the visits with my cardiologist, in 6 months, I lost 20 pounds. I wasn't trying to do it. I really wasn't. I didn't want to lose any weight. I wasn't trying to lose any weight. But we started doing this this walking, and we do we increase the interval. We increase the distance. And on a nice day, we might start at 51st Street in Lakefront, and we started out going 51st to 39th. Then we went from 51st to 31st. Then we went from 51st to Roosevelt Road. And you do it based on your own tolerance, And if you're tired or if it's not working or you're feeling some pain, especially, and you got to get some good shoes. If you're going to walk, you got to get some good shoes. And I would recommend, and that's not a commercial for them, but I went to Fleet Feet to get my shoes. So you need to make certain that your arches are appropriately supported, because a lot of us don't have appropriate arch support. So that's what you need to make sure you get. And I'm not talking about just those little cheap inserts, which are better than nothing, but take the time to see a podiatrist and make sure that you're getting your shoes, your feet appropriately looked at, and that you put the right kind of orthotic. I wear orthotics, and I have like 2 pair, and I keep them. I wear them on every pair of shoes that I put on, whether sneakers, dress shoes, whatever it is, I put them on. But if you do this, and you might only be able to do it 2 blocks the first time. That's right. But or if you do 1 block, do 1 block today, and you don't have to have any trainer. You don't need any instruction. All you need is just get out there and do it. And I can tell you, over that 6 months period, though I wasn't even trying, I didn't want to lose weight. In fact, I need to stop. But I also cut down the amount of I was eating too, although I don't eat that much to begin with. But it's just another one of those, to your point, Dr. Hampton, it's another thing that's simple, that you don't have to remember anything. You walk when you feel tired, stop.
That's right. And in the irony, I'm gonna say this real quick, Dr. Pete. What the other Dr. Bimbo Kikio recommends, when you're not doing the intense stuff, you walk. Like you can do it on the same day or the other day, and you stretch. That's it. So, but walking is probably the best. Stretching and walking is probably where you want to start.
Yeah, just for these, there are some fancy terms for what both my colleagues were talking about. So Dr. Mason mentioned the walking, and so that's called low intensity steady state. And so that has been shown to burn more fat more efficiently than your guys who are out here running. Like, I love to run, and that running is just sort of therapeutic for me. But when I'm really trying to burn fat, I should be walking, because there's a certain heart rate target that you'll burn fat more efficiently. And then to what Dr. Tony Hampton was talking about, my LB, is that there's something called time under tension. And so when you're lifting weights, you got these guys who lift all the weights, all the 4 and 5 plates on the other side. But then you take those same guys and you say, okay, I'm going to lighten the weight, but now you have to lift this weight slowly. And that time under tension, these very same big guys who can lift all that weight could not take, they can't lift that weight for, let's say, 60 seconds, where they have to slowly let the weight come down and then slowly push it back off of their chest. That's a whole nother intensity.
Oh, wow. And Dr. Mason, you'd be happy to know I rode my bike all week long last week, back and forth to work. I rode my bike. And even though it's an electric bike now, Monday and Tuesday when I started, I have to go over the expressway. So there's over 2 hills to get to work. I let the bike take me up the hill, and then I pedaled down. But on Wednesday, I pedaled all the way. So Thursday, I was pedaling. Friday, I pedaled. So yes, I know that weight I'm losing. I got to tighten my thighs back up. So I had a good time on my bike. It was hot, but I had a good time. Mary Ballinger says, good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Miss Martha is here, and she says, good evening to everyone. Virginia Knight says, afternoon to our favorite doctors, beautiful hosts and hostesses. Nellie is here. She's telling Gary Smith that he needs to chime on in. Sister Bonnie is here, and she says, good evening. Of course, Dr. Hampton placed that link for you there. Dorothy Murray is here, and she says, good evening to everyone. Jackie Robinson Ivy says that she tries to walk daily. She gave, and of course, we're not doing commercials here, but she gave some great examples of some shoes that you can buy. And she also agreed with Dr. Hampton, with Dr. Mason, on some of the stores being excellent. And Sandell Scott is here just as well. If all the doctors know that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Nikki, I was just going to say, so I think Dr. Mason's recommendation for Fleet Feet is that, and he may have mentioned this too, is that they actually measure your foot. Like they put you in a shoe, have you to run on a treadmill, and they film it, and they're watching how you strike. And I'm saying this because a good shoe for you may not be a good shoe for me. And so the way I strike, the way my body habitus is different. And so you really do, I think the value of going to a Fleet Feet as opposed to a Foot Locker or Nike or wherever is that they actually measure how you strike. And so I'm just trying to say, not that I don't recommend everybody's great recommendation, but it's just that, Brooks might be great for you, but New Balance might be great for me, and depending on how I strike.
No, I thank you for saying it. I just can't say it. So I thank you guys for saying it. I thank you for sharing that information, because I think people need to know how that actually works out. Go right ahead, Dr. Mason.
I was going to say, and people, you need to get out of this idea of spot weight reduction. You don't lose weight in spots. Okay. You want to lose this to lose your stomach, or you want to lose this to lose part of your butt, or you want to do this. No. That's you weight, you put it on everywhere. Now, some places have a little bit more propensity for how you do that. Probably Dr. Hampton talk about that. But I want you to get out of this idea that you can spot lose weight, and then the best way to do it is I was, I guess at my heaviest, Pete, I was about 240, and now I'm 170. And it came off everywhere all at the same time. It didn't you just don't lose. If you're talking about losing stomach, or I hear this all the time, and it just makes me cringe, because we really do need to be educated. You gain weight pretty much everywhere, and when you start losing it, you pretty much lose it everywhere. Maybe not all at the same rate, but you do. So if you begin to do the things in terms of eating and the moderate exercise, and watching the stuff that you eat. I mean, the stuff that you eat, those calories, calories in is, Dr. McDougall always says this, Dr. Hampton, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. So you just can't stay in the fried food joints all the time and think just because you got 4 chicken wings instead of 6, that's improvement. That's true. But we really do need to take a look at what we're eating. And I'll end by this, is that all of these restaurants have on their websites, they have their nutritional information sheets. And I copied, because I do a class where I copy, and so people can see, if I tell you can only have 1,500 calories today, and I'm going to give you a McDonald's menu, a Wendy's menu, all the different fast food joints, and then I'm going to give you a produce menu and show you that. And I'm going to tell you, it is almost impossible to get as many calories eating fruits and vegetables naturally than it is to get those calories very easily, and not good calories, from eating other foods.
Outstanding. Simply outstanding. So our next question says, if all the doctors know that fibromyalgia is painful, why do they think Blacks can tolerate more pain than whites?
Maybe Douglas can help us. Sure. Now he's white, but because okay. I'm curious, just talk about fibromyalgia a little bit.
You go lay out fibromyalgia
is one of those very complicated situations in medicine that I think is more advocacy than it is science. The pathologist who created this term submitted something that wasn't true. It was declared fraudulent, and he's kicked out of the medical society for it. And about 40 years ago, it became popular again because of advocacy. And one of the real problems that we have in this world is, if people want it and they knock on the doors hard enough, they're going to usually get something. Most of the time, when you look at research on fibromyalgia, you don't find the same thing twice in a row. It's called reproducibility. which makes it very, very hard to treat. From my perspective, as somebody who saw a lot of fibromyalgia and a small proportion of Black patients, I think it has a lot to do with training in medical school, and that you're taught that certain things occur certain ways. As a result, I think that many patients of color don't get the right diagnosis because they're assumed to have one thing and the other possibilities aren't included. So I think that that's one of the problems. And the other problem is, I'm going to go, it's cruelly cultural competency, that some people may not be able to interpret the language, the clues, and the culture and make the right diagnosis or respond to the complaints in an accurate way. So that would be my impression of that situation.
Yeah,
Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, Doug, I thank you for that. I think you hit it right on the nail, and I think you can argue that because it's like a perfect storm. One, because it's such a convoluted kind of disease process, added with our bias as a society about African Americans, and to your point, the lack of cultural competency teaching that we do in med school to teach people that everybody with diabetes doesn't walk in and say the same thing. And so how do you interpret things that our patients say? But as clinicians, we have to be able to have a broad sort of lens to say they won't all say the same thing, and they won't all say it in the same way. So that I tell you my pain is in my left shoulder, or I might say my pain is in my chest, but I really mean my shoulder. And so it's important that for us to have a competent medical and clinicians that will pick up on those subtleties and just ask another layer of questions that could help delineate what the patient is really complaining about.
So the other part about this, which I think is really distressing, is fibromyalgia has become a diagnosis of convenience. So when you can't figure it out, that's the label that you're given. And I can tell you that in the Black population, there's a very, very high percentage of a condition like rheumatoid arthritis that doesn't have a rheumatoid factor. And so if you don't know about this and you don't know how to examine for it, that person, by your training, has fibromyalgia, and they go undiagnosed and untreated, which is a very, very tough set of circumstances. So I personally think that there should be some changes in medical education and how we approach these patients, rather than just the way it's been taught, at least what was taught to me historically.
And what I've learned in my training as I'm studying functional medicine is that if you think your doctor knows everything about the human body, it's not true. I've learned so much about, like, for example, one of the speakers at our conference, Dr. Salcido, she was able to show, all the trials that connect inflammation, oxidative stress to not just we think about polycystic ovarian syndrome, and we think about if you lose weight and but we forget that the same cells, smooth muscle cells, the same cells that cause inflammation in your arteries that lead to heart disease and stroke and all those smooth muscle are in your uterus as well. And guess what? That same inflammation, that same oxidative stress, all of those things can affect your uterus. And guess what? That leads to fibroids. Guess what? That leads to, so the person who has polycystic ovarian syndrome will eventually end up with a fibroid uterus, will eventually have a higher risk for uterine cancer. But guess what? They don't teach that. My colleague, Dr. Pete, who went to school with me, they didn't tell us nothing about that. They never connected those dots. So it's an evolving science. And sometimes you got to leave your traditional doc and talk to people who do it a different way. And so if I saw a patient with fibromyalgia, I would remind them that if you do a complete body anti-inflammatory approach where you do the exercise, one of the things I like about the exercise we just talked about, if you're only doing it twice a week, there's probably going to be less inflammation. But if you exercise all the time, you're going to have inflammation. So it's like so too much exercise can harm you. Then I would work on that person with their stress. then I would work on that person with their sleep. If that person had previous traumas, I would help them resolve that. If that person has issues in their relationship, I would help them work on that. In other words, you have to do a complete, like, whole body approach, particularly with fibromyalgia. And what I found is that if you do those types of things, then you'll find success. And another thing I want to say is that when you struggle in healthcare, you don't want to just give up. Sometimes you have to be your own detective and start. So you go into PubMed and you type in fibromyalgia, natural treatment, whatever, and you'll know if the studies are valid or not, particularly if it says like systematic review, meta-analysis, and a randomized controlled trial. And if you see those type of talking points, you know it's probably legit. And you can just go to the abstract and look at the conclusion. So if you see, oh, fibromyalgia patients benefit from taking turmeric or something, then maybe that's something you discuss with your doctor and say, you know what, I just read this article and I heard that this was beneficial. I just read this article. I heard that if I, work on my sleep or stress. So those are the things you want to do. There's very few things on the planet that don't have an etiology or a cause. Don't ever, if the doctor shrugs his shoulders and say, I'm not sure, and they can't find somebody that can help you, you need to go help yourself, get another opinion, but do some research on your own. And in fact, I think half the people at our conference, whether it was a clinician or a patient, they were there because they took the time to learn on their own. Everything I do in nutrition and wellness, all the stuff I do on my podcast is all based on saying the conventional way is not working for my family, so I need to find better options. And half the stuff I do with my patients, I do not exaggerate, I had to kind of go out and learn on my own. I feel like I need to get a refund on my medical school education because people, I'm gonna say this last thing, I know I'm talking a lot. I tweeted something this morning and I would never have been able to do this in my previous life. It says, back to business as usual. As I return from my Low Carb USA conference, first 5 patients all have weight loss. Patient number 4 lost 71 pounds, reverse diabetes, not on medicine at all now, was on a CPAP machine, not on the CPAP machine anymore. And the 5th patient lost 25 pounds. My point is, in my previous practice, you would never see that. You wouldn't see it in a month. You wouldn't see it in 6 months. I saw it in the first 2 hours. So if you don't believe lifestyle will change your life, I need you to reconsider that belief system, because it will. And if you take the time to start focusing on that and stop depending on procedures, medicines, and surgeries, you will find a path to healing.
Hey, I have a question from my colleagues. One of my good friends spends some time in Colombia a couple times a year, and their thing was that they work out, really extensively here, really watch their nutritional intake here. But when they go to Colombia, they eat whatever they want. And he says he loses 15 pounds every time he goes to Colombia. But when he comes back, he gains the weight back as a result of being here. And, my immediate thought is our food source here is so, and again, this is unsubstantiated. I haven't gone and done any randomized controlled trial studies like my colleague said, but it just seems like our food source here is very, very sketchy at best. And to Dr. Hampton's point, I would encourage you to be very cautious on what you eat. And I'm not saying everything that says organic is not necessarily organic, and whatever that means for you. But I would just be very cautious on what you put in your mouth.
I had a patient, I had a colleague who was from another country. I can't remember which country it was from. And she said the first thing she noticed when she came here was that when she purchased a certain type of fruit, in her country, that fruit would typically start to change within really 2 to 3 days. Mm-hmm. She said the exact same fruit she purchased here, it looked the same 2 weeks later. So the stuff that we do to our food in this country is apprehensible. And yes, things will taste different when you go to other countries where they're not genetically modified and all the things that we do to food that in some countries they consider illegal, right? So it's really a combination of those realities in terms of what we do to food for in the name of profit. And then the other part is just like, I just think that if I am in China in a village somewhere, and like I'm like a don't eat a lot of rice because it's a carb, right? Well, you take that same person in China and they do just fine. But there are other factors. We call them there's other factors that determine confounding variables. That's what they say in research, right? So those confounding variables are, well, how much do they exercise? How much stress? What type of work do they do? Is it a stressful job or not? Is it something they're growing themselves? So there's other factors. And yes, if you take a person from China who has been in this country, they'll probably be obese in a couple of years. But if they go back to their home village, they would have no problem. So I think that what we do with our Western diet is that we destroy food in the name of profit. And you have to be your own, even if you can't afford to go to Whole Foods. The first thing is to know which foods cause weight gain, which cause inflammation. Stop eating the ones that do. And then as your resources improve, you can start to use those things that are considered, grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised, and things like that. When you look at a lot of the studies, I will be honest, the amount of inflammation you get from the foods that are going to cost you twice as much are not as substantial as you just eating the right food. I think if you just stay away from processed food and sugar, I would say seed oils and things like that, you'll probably go a long way to being healthy. You don't have to be, rich to eat healthy. I shop at Aldi's, so I don't think you have to be rich. You just have to know which items to avoid.
It's clear that what we are seeing is a lack of this transgenerational teaching about cooking. I grew up in a house with 10 kids, and we always had a pot of beans, and we always had rice, and we didn't have fried food was something maybe we had on the weekend, or baked chicken or roast or something on the weekend. The problem here is that, to your point, Dr. Hampton, the food substance, the things that we're calling food, they're food substances. That's what I call them. But these are manufactured, engineered foodstuffs. Many of them don't resemble anything like the thing they came from. And the body, when we put this stuff in our body, the body says, what the hell is this? And it reacts. That reaction is what Dr. Hampton referred to as inflammation. And the leading causes of death and disability we have in this country are clearly related to the amount of processed foods that we eat. And one of the leading causes of some of the antibiotic resistance we have now. One of the studies I looked at the amount of antibiotics that we feed to our livestock. And we look at the hormones that we're giving some of our livestock to make them grow faster. I mean, chickens today would be considered a hen when I was growing up because they're so much bigger. And the fact that when you eat out of these food outlets, because people aren't cooking as much, and it matters not what you're cooking, but it matters that you cook. And I will tell you, having eaten in a lot of countries, Thailand particularly, and I ate rice all the time when I was there. But first of all, the bowl was only about this big. It was a small bowl, and it was more filled with broth and mushrooms and other vegetables than it was with anything else. There was no meat in it because I don't eat it, but what meat there was just maybe tiny pieces of chicken or some tiny pieces. And when I went, and I'll close by this, when I went to Hong Kong the first time, back in 1983, Tony, to go to an erectile dysfunction conference, when I saw the Chinese kids in Hong Kong, and all the people were small. I shouldn't say small, they were normal. But when I went back to Hong Kong, some 15 years later, after the importation of places like KFC, more McDonald's, more of the fast food outlets, these kids look like somebody had put a hose in them and inflated them.
Wow.
And what I saw, whether it was in Trinidad, Ghana, all of these places, as we saw the importation of these fast food outlets that we have so plentiful in America, and the idea that because it was American, it was good, these people are now having the same problems with weight, diabetes, high blood pressure, and everything else like Americans do, because they're eating the same processed food. Processed means it's not from the way it was intended to be. It's been given something else to enhance its growth or to enhance some characteristic about the food. That's what's killing us.
Wow. Processed food. It takes me back to one of our Monday night evenings when the question came up, what is cereal, right? Like, what is cereal? It's so true. Number 3, why does sickle cell cause painful bouts of crisis?
Well, sickle cells, as the term suggests, are cells that your regular red blood cells, they're kind of rounded, and sickle cells get into the curvature of the cell changes where when it sickles. And to keep it simple, without getting too technical, if it does that, as it goes into those very small arteries in your body, they get stuck, they get blocked. And when that happens, it's like it can happen in your chest, it can happen in your belly, it can happen, and particularly in your bones and your joints. And when that happens, it causes a lot of pain. So that's why a lot of times people having a crisis, of course, they have to. It's like once you get like a backed up, all these sickle cells black, you have to kind of try to flush them out. So one of the things I remember doing, I don't take care of kids with sickle cell anymore because I'm primarily doing adults. We'd have to hydrate them like crazy just to kind of flush that through. And we also obviously would give them sufficient pain. And so it's a very challenging diagnosis. It was one of the most challenging things I had to deal with as a physician. Patients were always in and out of the hospital, and they were just kind of recovering, just hoping that they wouldn't have another episode. So, but anyway, that's what it is. That's probably to the extent I can speak to it now, because I'm not really treating that as much anymore.
Yeah, I'll just add to that too, Dr. Hampton, that that ability of that abnormally shaped cell to then carry oxygen is compromised. So that means that cell doesn't carry the same amount of oxygen that a normal shaped cell would, and that again causes that particular area that's lacking oxygen to have that reaction, which is that pain that you're feeling. So the lack of the normal shaped cell can then impact how much oxygen it can bring to that particular tissue.
Awesome. So the next, like part 2 of the question says, does the trials that they have out now or this cure therapy, does it really work for sickle cell, or how does that work?
It's funny. I actually had someone ask about this a while ago, but I don't know when they started research on this gene therapy that they have, but it's actually one thing I can say for sure. It's very promising. I don't think they're at the point where this gene therapy can guarantee you, but I just think that they're probably still in the trial. So the first thing I would say is that if you're a person with sickle cell, I would just look up, gene therapy for sickle cell and see if you can find the trials and see if you would qualify for it. And but I do remember that it talked about how like they can add a gene. I know people get nervous when you start talking about genes, like, oh Lord, they're trying to change me, right? But it's not that at all. I think they they add a gene without changing your genes. Let me say it that way. And what they're doing is they're adding genes that can help you make a normal hemoglobin, right? So hopefully the body will do its thing. And then I think there's another way to do it where they can take your current genes and like edit them and make them a little different. But it's only the gene that's dealing with the hemoglobin, not anything else. So, and if they can kind of help your current genes do a better job, it's very beneficial. Now, the reason why this is going to take a long time is because if they do this type of research and they don't do it right, or they don't look at, because imagine if it does affect your genes, imagine if it increases your risk for cancer because it's altering a gene that leads to cancer. So they're going to have to go slow and steady with this. But I'll be honest, in my career, I hadn't really heard anything as promising as this. But in some ways, I'm trying to figure. I remember when they started mapping all the genes, my brothers, and I thought when they started mapping the genes, we were just going to solve all the world's problems. But what I remember hearing Dr. Jason Fung, who's the intermittent fasting expert, and he wrote a book called The Cancer Code. And they thought that, once we map the genes, we'll be able to find the genes for cancer, and then but what they forgot is that cancer mutates like crazy. So even if you come up with a perfect cocktail for cancer for that one person, by the time you look up, it's going to mutate anyway. So it's very complicated, but I would be very excited if I, had a young child with sickle cell. I think or had a family history. I remember some of the families I took care of, they would have like a ton of people with sickle cell because of their genetics. And I think there's a lot of hope now.
Great. Inside of our congressional district, there are a couple trials at some of the greatest hospitals ever. And if I can share with our constituents who actually sent that question, if you can try Dr. Alexis Thomas at Northwestern. If it's a child, you can see Dr. Horace Smith over at Lurie's. You also have Dr. Han at UIC and Dr. Franklin, last name, he's an African, but he is simply awesome, over at Rush. They all have some great sickle cell therapy clinics there and trials that they're doing. So I would encourage you to reach out to them. They have a whole plan going on. We did tons of walkthroughs with each one, and I think it may be promising. So please reach out to any of those hospitals or any hospitals in Illinois, but those are definitely four that are inside of our congressional district that are making great strides with sickle cell. We're going to grab two questions off of YouTube. And one question says, and hopefully I can pronounce this right, but it's, what is adenomyosis? And they're spelling it ADENOMYOSIS. And is there a cure?
I don't know that. Like, my recollection is that's when you have endometrial tissue. In other words, like the most inner part of the uterus starting to grow into the other part of the uterus. So it's like it's growing in the wrong place. And I know that a lot of people who end up with this, it ends up kind of resolving on its own. So, but I think it can be painful. I mean, imagine tissue that's growing in the wrong place. That's going to be a problem. But the bottom line is, if you have that inner tissue growing in the muscle clearly it's going to get thick. It's going to lead to bleeding and things like that. And at the end of the day, this is when you need a gynae on the panel. I remember a lot of the women who had this, they kind of, it was self-limiting in that it kind of got better on its own. However, I think that, and I think that this is the type of thing you have to have an ultrasound to diagnose. But having said that, I think people take pain medicine. Some people get on birth control pills and things like that. And I think it's more of a hormonal treatment with birth control. Now, if it's not resolvable that way, you're looking at surgery. And because it can be pretty broad, hopefully it happens in people who are already, they've already started their families and And some people, I've seen people have hysterectomies. But then, like I said, a lot of people get it and it just kind of takes care of itself. So it just depends on the person.
Okay. Well, I know you used to tell us all the time in your younger doctor days when you would deliver babies in your younger doctor days. So I figured you would be right on top
Yeah,
of
that's
that.
why I had to cut the hair off, because I wanted to look younger, because I know Dr. Mason thinks I'm a baby right now.
You
And
are
we can
compared to me.
It's all
and
good.
if we need to revisit that question, I hope we answered you. But if we need to revisit that question, we can definitely grab an OB if we ever need to revisit that.
Yeah.
If you don't feel that we answered your question. Our second question off YouTube says, "Hi, I have a question. Will science ever design a mammogram tool more comfortable than the
Hmm.
one we use today?" Yeah, I'm all in for that question. Let's get some answers, Victor.
Yeah, that's a good question. I
I'm
mean,
here.
you would think that with all of the things that we're doing in science that we would have been able to get something that is more comfortable. And from a male perspective, I order mammograms all the time. I've never, I don't know what that's like,
You should take a
and
mammogram one day. You should take it.
no.
Nikki, I hear this, having had to buy a lot of equipment for mammography and things of that nature. And I will say it's gotten better. The techniques have gotten better. But for women with large breasts, in order to get a good mammogram, you have to sort of kind of flatten it out a little bit so that you can so the machine can do the best it can do in detecting any of these, I don't want to call them abnormalities, but these places that look different than other parts of the breast. So that's part of the thing. And I know that, and the only reason I know this is because when I was at County, we bought a number of brand new digital machines that made that detection better, because doctors like Dr. David Ansel and others have a major breast cancer initiative. When we looked at mammography, that the mammograms, particularly among African American women, weren't that good, and we ended up, to make a long story short, we ended up having Paula Grabler, who was related to Dr. Ansel, who was one of the lead doctors, who was a radiologist, to help define better ways to read these and to get better equipment to take these particular tests. So I understand. Just so that I would really understand mammography, I got permission from some patients to actually watch the mammography being performed, and I can see where it could be uncomfortable, because in order to get the breast tissue over the plate where the detection is going to take place, and for it to be done in such a way that you can have a reproducible kind of finding, it does require compression of the breasts. It just does. And many women with larger breasts, and the opposite end too, have problems, because the smaller breast, there's not as much tissue sometimes to do the compression. And it's with the compression. Now, obviously, I've never had a mammogram, but I've seen them done, and I've seen the equipment that we use, and I understand the theory about how it's done. Now, you'd be better talking to somebody like Dr. Grabler, who is, I think, at Rush, but one of these other people will give you better information. And it's not that people are trying to hurt you. It's because they're trying to help you by getting the best possible images for the mammogram to give you the best possible chance of finding something that might be abnormal that needs to be followed up with either biopsies or other procedures. But it unfortunately is just one of those things. We usually used to tell patients to take an Advil or something before their mammogram to help minimize some of that discomfort.
The other thing too, the other thing too is that we're also using MRIs now more often, especially for patients who may have more difficulty with a screening mammogram, or with those who have, let's say, confusing results on a mammogram. So may have things that look like this or maybe this, then we'll just go and do an MRI.
Oh,
And
wow.
my
Okay.
hope is that we'll eventually, we have a Cologuard, for example, as a way to detect the cancer genes for colon cancer. I hope that one day we come up with a way to detect breast cancer genes, maybe in a serum or something, because I'll be honest, MRIs are great, but hell, sometimes they over-diagnose things. And now you're having all these procedures that maybe you didn't have, maybe what's there is not really something that don't look normal, but it's not cancer. So I think we have to kind of, I would, if you're on this live stream, just Google how to make mammograms more comfortable. I remember when my kids were young and they wanted to do the roller coasters. I wasn't a big fan of that, and because I wasn't a big fan of the roller coasters, I had to go online and Google how to make roller coasters more comfortable. And it sounds funny, but it worked because they said you have to keep your head straight back, right? And don't look down, just sit straight. And it actually said when you start going down, you actually should look. Like if you don't see what's happening, you can get sick because your body's like, what's going on? So you actually want to look at what's happening, keep your head straight. And it sounds crazy, but then after a while, I became an expert on the roller coaster. I just took a moment to Google. So if you're having problems with your breast exam for a mammogram, just look up ways to be more comfortable with my mammogram. You may get some tips that may help you as you do this vital test. And I'm going to say it publicly because my wife is comfortable. My mom is comfortable with this. And my mom is a breast cancer survivor. Normal mammogram 1 year. The next year it was cancer. And I'm gonna tell you something. If she would be dead if she had not done that mammogram. Period. And that was like 20 years ago. So I'm a huge fan of encouraging our sisters to get their mammogram because once you wait too long, it's too late. I lost my grandmother because by the time she saw somebody, you can actually see the growth on her breast. So it was it had already metastasized. So we don't want to wait. Fear will kill you. So don't be afraid to be a little uncomfortable if necessary. But while you're thinking about this, look up some ways to be more comfortable.
So I definitely got to say thank you to all of you guys for being so sensitive about the matter. Thanks to Dr. Mason. There's tons of things streaming in right now on Instagram and on YouTube that Virginia Knight is saying, thank you. And she talks about how you did so many things when you were practicing with breast cancer and how you did she often talks about how you did a whole stream of going to beauty salons and working with women, making sure that they got mammograms done. And I see Dr. Paula myself, and she does tell you take a little Advil or whatever before you come. I mean, the pain lasts for a day or two, and it goes away, but it's completely worth that pain that's there. Know that I will be in pain next week because I usually get my mammogram around my birthday. Yeah, that's my plug to tell you guys my birthday is next week. So pray for me on that day. Deborah Jackson Johnson says, thank you. A better technique is needed. I'm yearly on my mammogram. So yeah, well, we just gotta continue the compressions. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so I don't know if people are aware, but the guidelines have changed, and so according to the American Cancer Society, if you have had previously normal mammograms, it's actually every 2 years now, and so I'm a big advocate of of being very scientific, and so I know patients are used to older guidelines and they want to adhere to those, which is the yearly. I would just say, instead of paying attention to this screening tool, pay more attention to the things that put you at risk for breast cancer. And if you honed in on that, then those, feeling comfortable doing the usual screening. And I should just say, this is not a body of people that just decide on their own when they want the screening done. This is after rigorous studies have done with thousands and thousands of patients. And so I would just encourage you to look at your, do like Dr. Hampton said, do your own research, talk to your primary care provider, and more importantly, pay attention to the things that put you at risk for breast cancer, colon cancer, prostate cancer. It's all high fat, low fiber diets. Yeah.
I'm gonna just throw this out there real quick, Nikki. When I did my presentation, one of the things when I went to California, one of the things I talked about, and I'll send this in the comments, it's a term called the Warburg effect. And the Warburg effect is the propensity for cancer cells to, the glucose turns into something called pyruvate, and then pyruvate ultimately, if you don't have oxygen in the environment, cancers tend to live in an anaerobic or a low oxygen state. Then that lactate then ultimately turns into energy in the form of ATP. But guess what? They can't really use other sources of fuel when in the mitochondria. They use glucose. In other words, sugar is the fuel of cancer. So I think you look up that Warburg effect, and you'll find that when you're feeding yourself a lot of inflammatory sugar, you're really feeding the cancer. And that's why people are doing research on alternative, clean fat sources, et cetera, that are maybe better in a cancer state. So it's just something to keep in mind. Brother Pete is just reminding us that if we don't protect this body, then we're more prone to cancer. If we live in an inflammatory state, we're more prone to cancer. So there's so much control you have over your own destiny, if only you had the knowledge. And then once you get the knowledge, which is what we're trying to do in this form, then your job is to say, you can't unlearn stuff. So once you heard it and you know what it is, then our goal is to coach you and support you, because it is hard to change habits. And then once you change your habits, then all of a sudden you can be like those 5 patients this morning who were celebrating, and that they were so anxious to see me. They say, you didn't say nothing about my weight, Dr. Hampton, and that's because they're excited because they made that change, and they say they feel good, they got energy, and I guess what, they have reduced their risk for cancer by doing that. So I really encourage all you guys to choose life over death.
And just to get back to I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Dr. Hampton. Dr. Mason.
No, I was just going to say, just to the inflammatory situation, because inflammation, diabetes is inflammation, obesity is inflammation, blockages in the artery is inflammation, even cancer, there's some relationship to inflammation. And one of the things that create a lot of inflammation are the foods that we eat. And it's really clear, there's clear science that shows that a chemical that we did the study on in the church, TMAO, and some of these other trimethylamine oxide are inflammatory agents, and they're produced by the consumption of things like cheese, eggs, and fat. And so what we're saying is, if you want a low inflammatory diet, you really, really do have to eat far more vegetables and fruits than this other stuff that we're eating. And because many of the foods that we eat are convenience foods and are things that are readily available, and our taste buds have been sort of designed to want something that's a little oily, salty, and crunchy. And if you think about it, those things, that's the potato chip industry, popcorn, all of those, most of those fast foods, the stuff that comes out of most of the change that we see. And you got to remember, none of these companies have any interest in your health. Your only interest for them is to come keep buying what you're buying. That's what they want you to do. And as long as you keep doing that, and I'm not blaming you, because it's been a science that's been used to make you want to eat this sort of stuff. And we call ourselves being too busy to cook, too busy to do the things that we need to do. And as a result, our default for a lot of reasons, and I won't go into all of those, is to just grab something fast. And for the brothers that are out there, I'm doing a talk on prostate cancer, looking at, we got to stop about most of these cancers respond almost the same to a lot of things. And then for those of you who are drinking cow milk with large amounts that have large amounts of insulin growth factor 1, insulin growth factor 1 now has been related to cancer growth. And it's because the cow is designed to take a calf from being 65, and the data is real clear on this now, 65-pound calf to being a 400-pound cow. And that requires a hormone in the milk or a chemical in the milk that helps make the cow's cells grow faster in order to accomplish that. And when we drink the cow milk, which we don't need at all, once we grow beyond the milk, all mammals provide milk for their own, and that includes people. And that's why when I was at the county, we were major advocates of breastfeeding. And perhaps one of these talks, we need to talk about that. We need to do more breastfeeding. It is critical that we do more breastfeeding because that is the absolute perfect food for the baby. And to just show you how perfect it is, there was a study that was done at Rush in the NICU where they gave some of the children, they used to have and I know we're out of time, a breast milk bank. And they fed the breast milk from other women to the women that were unable to have breast milk. And what they found was some profound differences. And what I'll do is in one of the other times that we talk, go more into this, because we really do need to increase our breastfeeding rates. When I was at the Department of Public Health, the best milk for a baby is the milk that comes from its mother, not from a cow. And so, and we can go through that. And Nikki, one of these days, remind me to bring that information. And there are other people who were part of that study when we took some of these babies in the NICU and actually gave them the milk from other women. These babies began to thrive. The NICU means neonatal intensive care unit. I'm sorry. Those babies began to thrive when they started drinking milk from somebody else's mother, some other woman. You might say, well, you mean that they drinking some other woman's breast milk? Well, you drinking cow milk. So what can you say? Shut up. So the thing is, we have to understand the realities of what we're doing here and the real things that make sense. And those of us like me who are old, in fact, my 70th birthday is coming up in a few days. We grew up drinking breast milk. And when you go to other countries, it's not uncommon to see women in public breastfeeding their babies. And it's very accepted in a lot of places, unless they're trying to be too westernized. But we'll get into that at another time. But please, any woman out there who's pregnant, please, 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 as best you can. I bought this $400 breast pump from my daughter when she had my because I did not want my grandson to have no cow milk. So she pumped the breast to have milk that you could put in the refrigerator and serve to the baby later. So I'll stop right there.
Well, Dr. Mason, there's one additional thing that I have to say that I've always heard come out of your mouth and I've always heard you advocate for. And when we were talking about the mammograms and things of that sort, and Pete shared the new information about, you can go every 2 years. Mm-hmm. I know Dr. Hampton talked about the serum, that whole Braxis gene informational, but you also would remind everyone to make sure that you do self-breast exam to know your body and to know your breast. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Mason actually had these small breasts that he had in these little boxes that he would give away as gifts. Do you remember those, Dr. Mason? He would give away these tiny
those were from the American Cancer Society. They gave us those.
Yeah, so you would know what the actual lump felt like. And they will tell you on the box, there's 4 or 5 lumps in here. Find them all. And it really made you find these lumps so you would know what to look for on your own breast. So don't be afraid to actually touch your own breast. Know what they feel like. Find the lump if it's there. So you'll know in between those visits where you need to go. And of course, we are out of time. And I know you would text me 3 times about this keloid question. So we're going to ask this one question and then we're going to end for the evening. I know there's some other questions. We're going to get to them. I promise that we will. We'll grab them next week, just like, Wilbur will tell you. We'll reach back and grab that question. But why are African Americans so prone to keloids? Also, can keloids be permanently removed? And if so, what's the proper procedure?
I would recommend seeing a dermatologist who has skill with doing this procedure. It is not easy. It is a overgrowth. It's a scar that doesn't know how to stop repairing itself. And there are special dermatologists who have expertise in doing that kind of scar removal.
All right. So
I'll just add that a lot of times it's in areas where there's been micro trauma, and it is. I know it's more common in people with dark skin. I agree with that. I'm not sure if I understand the mechanism behind it, but it is a pigment associated risk. So people with darker skin just tend to get it more frequently.
And I would just like to add that Dr. Hampton pledged a fraternity that does a lot of branding and things of that nature. And so he has a couple of keloids on his arm.
Easy there.
Is this secret telling time? All right now. As we say on every Monday night, what's your until next Monday? Doug, what's your until next Monday? Your thoughts until next Monday. What do you want to leave embedded in the minds of the viewers?
Well, we live now in an instant world and an instant society. And there's an old saying that was too good to be true, it's too good to be true. That's clearly true what's going on with COVID right now. And there's a new, quote, treatment for this that the other scientists missed, like something about treating for horse parasites. And the answer is, it is too good to be true. Don't want to go there. It can make you violently ill, and it won't work. Well, unfortunately, got to stay the course. Got to listen to some of the people who have been specialized in looking at viruses and viral illnesses for decades, and hear what they have to say and process it.
All right. Dr. Terry Mason, your until next Monday.
In God we trust, all others must have data. So as we look at things, we need to make sure that the data must be verifiable. So we want to make certain, and that's what we try to do on this panel, is give verifiable data as best we can so that we're all on the same page when it comes to the advice that we give to people. I think most of us stay away from our personal opinions. Most everything that you've heard here is somewhere, whether we didn't said it or not, is based in fact and in science. And that's what we go by. And if you have not gotten your vaccine yet, please, please, please get your vaccine for the coronavirus.
All right, Bishop. I knew you was going to take us to church before we left here. I knew you was taking us, Bishop. Thank you so much. Dr. Tony Hampton, you're until next Monday.
I just want you to be true to who you are. And, when I went to San Diego, my biggest fear, I really didn't want to go because we're in a pandemic, but I had made a commitment and I went. So you're in a room with, 200 people, and you felt like an outlier because you may have had 10, maybe 15 people out of the 200 wearing a mask. So it was a little awkward to meet my heroes in this low carb space. And it was just awkward, but you have to be true to yourself. But I will not, I prefer to be awkward than to be dead. So I just wore my mask, and, obviously I didn't wear it when I spoke and I didn't wear it when I ate, but I wore my mask. And so when you think about your life journey, if you get sick from COVID and you're struggling to breathe on a ventilator, that's you struggling to breathe, nobody else, not the people you were, trying to, impress that you were okay without wearing a mask. So I just encourage everybody, have the courage. And it took courage. I'll be honest. I was pausing, hesitating, not sure what to do. But at the end of the day, you have to make the decision that makes a lot of logical sense, which is, and I don't want to bring that back home to my family. So I encourage you to be that way, keep taking care of your body, and continue to keep feeding yourself with the knowledge that we're trying to share in this platform.
Fantastic. Dr. Pete, you're until next Monday.
Yeah, until next Monday, just know that this Delta variant is not playing games. And where you can, try to encourage your friends and relatives to get vaccinated. And to be open and ask questions, when they are coming up with what might seem to be very weird reasons why they don't want to come up or why they don't want to be vaccinated, but just be open to listen, and then just try to share with them that, hey, is that factual or that's just something that you heard? And B, it's okay. Like, you don't have to make up something. Don't tell me it was some big study and it really wasn't, but you just happen to look it up on the internet and there it is, Yeah, see, they put magnets in it now, so and just like Tony, I was at my barbershop and I was just amazed that there was this pervasive, a lot of bogus answers going on. And we have to be open to listen to our people and to share facts. And so I couldn't leave there. Like, again, I wanted to be one of the cool kids, but I'm like, okay, it's time for me not to be the cool kid now. I gotta be the nerd and tell everybody that's wrong. Here's the truth behind that. That's wrong. Here's the truth behind that. And so we just got to be courageous, like my brother said, and it's okay to be, just to be the outlier. Many of us had to be that. And so I think being a responsible leader in your community means that you don't mind walking alone, and especially if that lonely walk means you were fighting for something that meant something and that was just and honest and true. And so I think at least half of the people in that barbershop said, you make up, you have some good points. I don't know if they're going to go out and get vaccinated or not, but at least they were able to say, that's a good point. And to hear a counter argument to a lot of the things that they were saying. So, that's more work that needs to be done. And maybe we need to, take this show on the road and take us to some beauty salons and barbershops and have some real honest conversations.
All right, let's remember to keep the Jacksons in our prayers, Reverend and Mrs. Jackson. Let's remember to keep them in our prayers. It was released publicly today that Mrs. Jackson may have been placed in an ICU, I believe. So the fact that they're not home yet, let's continue to keep them in our prayers, praying that they will transition home safely without any COVID long haulers. So let's continue to pray for that. Remember to stand up, mask up, and get vaccinated. So important to do that. Wash those little hands just as well. Dr. Green texted me. She had plans on being here tonight. It is her birthday today. She had plans on being here because she wanted you all to sing happy birthday to her. But she had family members who kind of like invaded her house and she couldn't get on. So next week we got to sing happy birthday to her, and not just to her. We have to also sing happy birthday to Dr. Terry Mason because his birthday is coming up in a few days. And I'm going to come snatch you up one night this week because I know you're going to drive at night. I'm going to come snatch you up and take you to eat. I'll have chicken Vesuvio while you have some pasta. So I'll let you hear from me while you have your pasta for your birthday. All right. Until next Monday, we'll see you guys then. Stay safe and remember that true health is wealth. Have a great one.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.